So how's everybody doing? As you guys were told last week, the next 2 week, this week and next week are going to be review week. I'm going to be up here doing the Old Testament, and next week Heya will do the New Testament. And because we got to start a new class the week after, the test we're going to give you guys is going to be take home. And we expect you guys to be, totally honest with yourself, not to cheat or whatever. And so that's the plan for the next 2 weeks. And since this is more of a review session, I'm going to leave the floor open to you guys because I don't know what questions you may have. I'm going to touch up on the major parts of the Old Testament, like just go through it. But before I could do that, I'm going to leave the floor open for you guys if you have any questions. So any questions in specific you guys had? None?
That 1 week when you went over the map of the Syria and everything,
Yeah.
Can you please?
Yeah, we do that. Actually, that's why I asked you to bring the marker. We're gonna draw that map over again. But I want that to be last because that's the last thing that happens in the Old Testament transition to the New Testament. Is there any question before that, like the Kings or any First Kings, Second Kings, the Samuels, all the Exodus? If you guys have a question on those, or you just want me to go through it like briefly. All right. So the Old Testament. Can anybody tell me the format? Like how it's set up. First of all, how many books do we have in the Old Testament? How many books do we have in the Ethiopian or Orthodox Bible?
81.
And then just in the Old Testament. We have 45 books in the Old Testament in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. And does anybody remember the setup, how it's called? It's a very catchy number pattern.
5, 12, 5, 5, 12.
Okay, yeah, and we have 5. The first 5 is what? 5 books of? No. First, what happens first?
Creation.
Yeah, and then what does Moses do like an Exodus and like yeah, the 5 books of law. And then we have the 12 books of what? History. Then 5 books of?
No. Poetry.
These are your Proverbs, your Psalms.
Oh, poetry.
Poetry. 5 books of poetry. And then you have 5 what?
Minor prophet.
Major. 5 major prophets and 12 minor prophets. Yeah, and you guys will need to know that for the test is going to be one of the questions. And again, since this is an introduction course, we didn't cover books for example, the 5 books of poetry. We didn't cover them because the whole point of this course is to get you guys to know basically that to show you guys the Old Testament from the beginning of creation up until Jesus Christ is all a story that's connected together. It's not just a bunch of books put together in that specific order. Everything is followed with the other, like Abraham, like Isaac, everything it follows one another. And because of that, we're not gonna follow books. We didn't go in depth into the 5 books of poetry, the 12 minor prophets, whatever, because those don't really have much to do with the story. But if you want for example, and if you want motivation, aspiration, if you're struggling through bad times, whatever, you go read your Proverbs, your Psalms. That would help you out, but it wouldn't help you in knowing the story that we're going over. So what is the first book of law? Genesis, yeah. And can anybody tell me, since this is a review, I don't want to be the only one doing the talking, just a brief synopsis, a small synopsis of the first part of Genesis. What happens up till Adam gets kicked out? Anybody? Eve. What happens?
I don't know if I'm right, but I think he prays and to go back or fast.
No, I'm saying what happens up until he gets kicked out. Like Genesis, like a lot of stuff happens in
What
Genesis.
happens?
Yeah, between before he gets kicked out.
They sin.
Yeah, that's very broad, but okay.
The devil is a snake trick.
Okay, where did Adam come from?
Going
Like,
over the summary.
okay.
Okay, God created Adam and Eve.
All right, go ahead.
I thought you wanted a summary.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Do you?
And then the devil disguised as a,
It's
I
good.
forgot, serpent. I was about to
Mhm.
say servant, you see? Thank you, sir. Thank you. As a serpent, he went and tricked Eve into eating the fruit, which God,
That's forbidden, right?
yeah,
Yeah, because
instructed them not to eat, which makes it forbidden.
okay.
And yeah, as a result, she got picked out.
All right, thank you, David, for that synopsis. All right, first of all, we all know that the in the 7 days the God's creations, you guys could look over those. So God created the heavens and the earth, you know, the sea, the animals, and everything, and then He created Adam, and He believed that Adam needed some partner, and He created Eve out of his rib, and those two are together. Now they had the Garden of Eden to themselves. They were the kings. Like all the animals, were theirs for them to eat. All the other trees were there for the. It was theirs. Garden of Eden was theirs. But God made the exception of one forbidden fruit. He said you can have anything else but this fruit, and they were like, all right. And you know the tricky, devious character that the devil had. He went in the form of a serpent, and he went up to them and said, you know why God doesn't want you to eat that, right? And they were like, yeah, I mean, just because He just told us not to eat it. No, He tells them that the reason why He doesn't want you to eat it, because if you eat it, you would want to be like God. Now, once they ate the forbidden fruit, the sin was not only eating it, but the fact that they wanted to be like God. That's the bigger sin. They wanted to be God. And you guys know what happens. They eat the forbidden fruit and they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And Adam and Eve, they were trying to, again, get back into the Garden of Eden by praying and stuff. And he was praying for 30 days, I believe. And he wanted to pray for 30 days. And Eve was alongside with him. And the devil comes again, disguised as a serpent. As an angel, sorry about that. And he tells them, oh, God has forgiven you. You don't need to pray anymore. And when Eve said this, they were like, okay, we don't need to pray anymore. Don't worry about it. We could just stop. And once they stop, they realize they've been tricked. And this is when Adam passes out, and he wakes. A rock falls on his head, and he was unconscious, and he starts bleeding. And once he wakes up from that, he mixes the blood that came out of him with the sand, and he tries to make offering to God. And that's when God tells him, I'll come in 5,550 years or whatever. And we're doing a review of the Old Testament, by the way, for those of you that just walked in. So we're on Genesis right now, yeah. Sorry. And that was actually considered the first prophecy, the prophecy of the coming of Jesus Christ. That's how He told them. And there's that. And
I have a question.
yes.
That 5.5 days, I can't find it in our Bible. Do you know where it is?
The what?
The 5.5 days where He says He's coming in 5.5 days.
Not 5.5 days. It's years. It's
Right.
yeah.
But the scripture where it says that, do you know where it is?
I could look at it after. I just saw it whatchamacallit. If you know the specific verse.
I don't think you will find it from the Bible. Maybe in the comments, but it's not written like this age. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I saw something similar to that, I guess. Oh. Okay. And so that's the first part of Genesis up until Adam gets kicked out of heaven. Now, what happens once they get kicked out? Their life on earth. What happens? Anyone? They have kids. Their kids are, everybody should know this, Abel and Cain, right? And we all know who's the bad one, and Abel's the good one. And they were making offerings to God. You're the good one. This is your story. They were making offerings to God, and as you guys know, God favored Abel's offering over Cain's, and because of the jealousy, Cain actually ends up killing Abel. And in Genesis, it also says that they have another kid. His name is Seth, and she named him that because this won't be on the test, but this is actually something I learned. She named him Seth because she said God has blessed me with another child to replace Abel, the dead child Abel. And now this also isn't mentioned in the Bible. This is like you could read this. There's a book, I don't know what the name, it was called Dawid. You could ask him if you like, but it's not mentioned in the Bible. But Abel and Cain had twin sisters. Now, of those twin sisters, since like it was just them on the universe, to multiply, they needed to marry each other's sisters. Now, Abel's twin was not the prettiest one. I don't know what that says about Abel. So he gets jealous of that, but he gets jealous of that fact that he has to marry the uglier twin rather than the good twin that he has. That's not
Cain's sister?
Huh?
You mean Cain's sisters? Oh,
Cain has to marry gets to marry Abel's sister.
he wanted to marry his own sister.
Yeah, because Abel's
all sisters.
huh?
They are all sister and brother, but it's like.
No, I mean Cain's twin. Yeah. They're all related. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's not mentioned in the Bible, but it's mentioned like a book outside of the Bible. I don't know what the name is called. And once this happens, again, I'm jumping through the book of Genesis. So like, what happens is the people start sinning a lot. They start sinning like crazy, and like it made God very disappointed. So this is when the story of who comes in. Huh? Who? No, Abraham was later on. What happened? Who, like the rains and somebody had to build an ark? Noah's ark, right? Yeah, because the people were sinning, God decided to, like he told Noah, take 2 pairs of each animal, take your family, tell the people that there's going to be a huge storm and to get in. But the people thought he was just crazy, and they wouldn't listen to him. And once they see the rain coming, like they try to run to the ark, but the gates have already closed. Now, we're going to go off tangent a little bit, but like this relates to us because right now, you know, all over the place, we see like we have the resources, right? We have the resources to come to church. We have the resources, the books, the Bible, the internet. Although, like, you got to be selective of what you read. We have all the resources telling us, like, what to do and what not to do. But if we're late, like the people of that didn't listen to Noah, the gate is going to close on us. And that gate, in our sense, would be the gates to the kingdom of heaven, our promised land, which, again, pops up again as the promised land in most of the story, but we get to that. So, again, the flood takes place, and they get through the flood. There was Noah and his family, and this then transitions us into the story of Abraham. Yeah, but before, keep in mind,
His 3 sons?
huh?
What, his 3 sons?
Yeah, Noah's 3 sons. And now, keep in mind, Abraham was not always named Abraham. His name was Abram, like without the H. His name was Abram, and he came out of Shem's bloodline. Yeah, of Noah's 3 kids. He came out of his bloodline, and he was married to a woman named it's not Sarah. I don't know how to. Is this Saria? Like, huh? It's not Sarah, but like.
Some people say Sarai. I heard it.
Yeah, it's Sarai, right? Yeah, it's Sarai. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, but those 2 were married, and they weren't able to conceive a son. Although they were married, they were not able to have a child. And like Sarai, like she kept praying, but again, like no child. And they became really old to a point where like it was laughable for them to have a child. So when it was like she was getting of age, she was like, you know what? Because of my because I'm not able to have children, it doesn't mean you can't have it doesn't mean your bloodline keeps going. So she let Abraham sleep with the maid or one of the servants, Hagar, and then they conceive a child named Ishmael. Now Ishmael is not the blessed child of Abraham and Sarah because he didn't come from Sarah, and now after this takes place, God makes a covenant with Abraham, and he then names him from Abraham. He changes his name from Abram to Abraham, from Abram to Abraham, for the English accent, whatever, and then he named Sarai to Sarah. You guys with me so far? And then he promises them a son. He told him, Sarah, you're gonna have a daughter. I mean, a son. Sorry, you're gonna have a son. And at this point, Sarah, she laughed. It was laughable. She was like, okay, yeah, I'm right. I'm gonna have a son. And then when she said, at that moment, she conceived a son, God gave him a son, and named him whom? Isaac. And does anybody know why he was named Isaac?
It means to laugh.
More people. Come on. It was only this side. Huh? Go ahead.
I said that.
He laughs.
Yeah, because the fact when God told her when she was going to have a child, she laughed, he laughed. Yitzhak, right? What's your last name?
Yitzhak.
Ah, okay. Why is the name that? Do you laugh a lot?
Yeah.
No, but that's how he got his name. Yitzhak means laughter. And that's how he got his name. And now comes the story of Isaac. Well, you guys know this. I'm expecting everybody to know this. As soon as they have that one son, what does God ask Abraham to do?
Sacrifice him.
Sacrifice him, right? And what does Abraham do? Can I get somebody to raise their hand? Okay, here.
He tries to kill the other dude. He almost kills the other girl's son.
Well, no, that's not. Okay, go ahead.
He was he was obeying God's command. He went up to take him to the mount to sacrifice him, and then an angel told him to stop, and then he stopped. He didn't sacrifice him, but it was somewhat of a test from God to see if he would carry out his command.
Exactly, and that's what happens. And what the angel told him, also God has sent Abraham a lamb to sacrifice at that moment instead of his son. And then we transition to Isaac's family, Isaac's bloodline. Keep in mind, we're still in the book of Genesis. There's a lot that happens in the book of Genesis. Now, Abraham, he marries a woman named Rebecca. Isaac. Isaac marries a woman named Rebecca, and they have twins. Their twins named are, does anybody know? Just shout it out.
Jacob.
Esau.
Jacob and?
Esau.
Esau, yeah. And by raising your hands, can anybody describe the characteristics of those two? Although they are twins, they are very different.
Esau was a hunter, like a mortal warrior. Jacob was at home, more close to his mom, I guess, somewhat.
Yeah.
More at home, and Esau was more out and about, cooking animals and hunting down animals and all types of stuff.
Yeah.
And come back home.
And also at the birth, Esau was the firstborn. He came out the womb first. But as he was coming out, Jacob was holding on to his heel. That's how he got his name Jacob. Jacob means to hold it to the heel. And Esau, when he came out, he was very hairy, and that's what Esau means, that he's a hairy child. Now, like you said, the father Isaac, he favored Esau because he was more of the manly, the hunter, and he bring home the beast or whatever. And Jacob was favored by his mother Rebecca because he was a stay home, he cooks and whatnot. And what happens now is this is years later. Like they're both Esau and Jacob are grown. He asked Esau comes home from hunting and he was like, I'm really hungry. Please, like, give me the stew. And what does Jacob say to him at that moment?
Give me your birthright.
Huh?
So I'll trade you this for your birthright.
Exactly. And Esau, like, not realizing what his birthright is, he just gave it away, just formed some stew, right? And after this happens, again, like, I'm flying through the book of Genesis. It comes to a point where Isaac is very old, like, he's old. He got really old and he had to pass down his blessings. And he told Esau to go out in the forest, get like a beast, whatever, and make me some type of stew. And when the mother heard this, she calls Jacob, and she tells him, you know what, your brother's out there in the wild, and like I'm gonna make the stew for you. You go get like wear your brother's clothes so you can smell like him. Get some like fur or whatever, because keep in mind, what's the one feature that we know about Esau? He's very hairy. So he was like, get some fur, and like I'll make the stew for you. You're gonna receive the mother's blessings. And so that goes to accordingly. And when he goes to Isaac, what does Isaac say? Come on, show of hands. You guys know the story. All right, okay.
Well, he, being as though Isaac was blind at the time, he basically took the fur, put it up on his hands, and when Isaac went to feel Jacob's hands, he said that Jacob had he had Jacob's voice, but Esau's hands, the texture of his head, and so he thought that it was Esau, and so he went ahead to give him the blessing, and
No, he also there was another test he did, like to make sure it was Esau. Do you know what it is?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And he was like, it sounds like it, feels like it, will, like, to make sure, it's like, come give me a kiss. But when he gave him a kiss, he smelled him, it was like, okay, so, like, it is really you. And then he gave him the blessing. Now, Esau's coming back, he's like, okay, Pops, you know, I got you the stew that you wanted, can I receive my blessing? He was like, did I not just give you my blessing? Like, I just gave you the blessing. And, like, Esau realized what happens. Esau realizes that, Jacob has stolen his birthrights. And, his blessing. And he has also stolen his birthrights. And he got so mad, he was like, I'm going to find him, I'm going to kill him. Rebecca sees this. She tells Jacob, go to my brother's house, Haman. And go live there because your brother's coming to get you. And this transitions us into Jacob's journey, and how he comes about. And now, so Jacob, he's running away, and he falls down. Not falls down. It was sunset time, and he finds a little rock, and he falls asleep on it. Okay. That's not really important. Okay, so Jacob goes to Haman, and he sees Haman's daughters, and wants to marry Rachel. But Haman had 2 daughters. He wants to marry Rachel. He asks Haman, can I marry your daughter? He said, you got to work for me for 7 years. After working for him for 7 years, he gives him the other sister that he didn't want, because saying that we have to marry our firstborns first. We have to marry the firstborn child first. And then he worked for 7 more years to get Rachel. And this process, Jacob ends up he has 12 children. 12 from, Jacob?
10 from Leah.
Yeah, and he actually ends up only having 1 born child from
Markel?
Rachel, right?
That's more.
No, the one that was conceived of Rachel,
Yeah,
right?
He has women as well.
Yes, Joseph and Benjamin from Rachel.
Okay, all right. So he has the 12 children, and on his way home, God told Jacob to go home, and on his way home, he he fights a man. Like he just starts they start fighting, and like he's keep asking him who he is. Like he's like, I'm not gonna tell you who I am. And then it got to a point where they were just going at it, and Jacob says, I'm not gonna like stop until I receive your blessings. And when this happens, God gives him God gave him a blessing. He renames him whom? Israel. And this is a story that says that you can find in Genesis. Jacob fights God, and it was God that he was actually fighting, and so he gets the name of Israel. And now keep in mind he had 12 sons. And later on, each son is going to have a tribe of, so the 12 tribes. And of those 12, Isaac's favorite, Jacob's favorite, or now Israel's favorite was whom? The favorite child? Joseph. He was the youngest one, and the others envied him. He has a bunch of dreams saying that, my crops were bound down to your crops and whatnot. And it got to a point where they couldn't take it anymore. So they sold him. They sold him, and he became a slave in Egypt. And Jacob, again, one, he's a dreamer. Two, he's a very holy man. So he worked his way up. He started from slavery, and he works his way up to being like almost a lead officer and whatnot, to a point where like the king trusted him. And one time the king had went out of town, I forget, I think it was for battle or something, and the king's wife sees him. She sees Joseph, and she wanted him to go to bed with her. And he was like, no, I can't do this. After all he's done for me, I can't do this. And so she keeps trying, he keeps trying, but what ends up happening is what? What did she end up doing? Blackmail him by doing what?
By saying that she would tell her husband that she did something.
Yeah. Basically, he said that I'm going to force... she said that if you don't sleep with me, I'm going to tell my husband that you forced yourself upon me. And he was like, you know what, I'll take the punishment. Again, he's a very holy man. So when the king comes back and hears this, he was like, how could you do this? And he sends him to prison. And again, Joseph, what did I say? He was a what? A dreamer. So he was able to interpret dreams. And while he was in prison, there was two, one cupbearer and one of the king, and one
Baker.
Yeah, baker. And those two have dreams, and they tell him what the dreams are. And basically, what happens is he interprets their dream well. Like he interprets it correctly. What he said exactly happened, and he told one of the people that interpreted the cupbearer. He was like, "Don't forget about me when you make it out there." And the king, he went back to being the king's cupbearer, and the king had a dream that no one could interpret. And the cupbearer remembers, like, oh, there's a guy in prison that I was with. His name is Joseph. He can interpret your dream. He comes out, he interprets the dream, and eventually, like, Joseph, he's a hero again, and he's saved again. And it got to a point where he was ruling almost Egypt, and his brothers came back. Because at the time Egypt had all the food. If you guys could go back and read, the dream he had was there's going to be 7 years of abundance and whatnot, and there's going to be 7 years of drought. And Egypt got prepared for those 7 years of abundance for the 7 years of drought. And Joseph's brothers ends up coming back to him, and Joseph's brothers end up coming back to him, and he ends up living together. And Joseph's generation passed, but Israelites are now in Egypt. And this transitions us into the story of Moses, which I need to go over because I think almost everyone here knows the story of Moses, right? And that's basically the book of Exodus. The Moses is what happens in the book of Exodus. And once he's leading the people into the promised land, they get sent into the 40 years of wilderness because they didn't believe that there was a promised land. And this then leads us to Joshua, which comes after the death of Moses. He was the next one that was going to lead the Israelites. basically what you need to know for this one is Joshua leads the Israelites into the promised land, into Jericho. This is how the walls of Jericho fall. You guys can read up on how it actually happens. And Joshua leads the Israelites into the promised land. Now, at this point, once they get to the promised land, the people of Israel completely forget about God. They completely forget. Once they got to the promised land, they forgot that it was God that got them all this way. And this transitions us into the book of Judges. And Judges, what happens is every time the people are sinning, they would get assigned a bad judge, and then they would pray to God, and then God would send them someone to rescue them, and then they would thank Him and go back to sinning. And this cycle happens how many times?
16.
How many times?
16.
16 times, until the last appointed judge, which is Samuel. Yeah, and then Samuel, once he was the last appointed judge, but at this point, Israelites say they want a what? Yeah, you say we're done with judges, we want a king. God is like, all right, even though I've given you all this, you can still get your king. And who does Samuel anoint to be king? Saul. Yeah, and Saul, he was a righteous king up until the specific moment is where Samuel told him, do not make a sacrifice and go to battle without me. And, Saul was waiting, but Samuel wouldn't come. So he was like, you know what, we're going to lose this war, so I got to make the sacrifice. As soon as he makes the sacrifice, who comes? Samuel. And that's when Saul became a disobedient king. So Israel needed a new king, who's the next king?
David.
Huh? David. And David was also a good king, but what was his problem?
Women.
Yeah. He ends up sleeping with Bathsheba, and they have a child that's not blessed, and he gets forgiven, has another child, who in the name of? Solomon. Yeah, Solomon. And what was King Solomon known for? Wisdom. And you guys know the story of the baby being split in half and whatnot. And after and what was Samuel's flaw? What was wrong with Samuel?
He started worshiping other gods.
Yeah, it was with lust too. So it got.
He had all those other women that were from those idol groups.
Yeah, he started worshiping the idols of his many wives. So his lust, huh? Solomon, yeah. Samuel, oh my bad. Solomon, yeah. We passed Samuel. Samuel was back there. So Solomon, he marries many wives. So his lusts lead him into worshiping other idols. And this then kind of just transitions us into those books of poetry, which we're not going to look at. Which part? No. All right, and so now the rest of this is basically the fall of Israel. Basically, they got their promised land, but now everything is going south for them. They've been sinning, and this is where the story of Jeroboam and Roboam. How do you say their name? Rehoboam and Jeroboam.
Yeah, Solomon's son.
Yeah.
Who only ruled over Judea.
Yeah.
Not entire Israel.
Yeah, and the Rehoboam was the good king, and Jeroboam was the bad king. And at this point, this is what you asked for earlier. What? Oh, okay. I mean, all right. They were brothers, but okay. Basically, what happens is Jeroboam was supposed to be king, and no, Rehoboam was supposed to be king, and the people asked him to lower taxes, and he goes and asks the youth, what do you think I should do? And they were like, yeah, what? You're the king, keep the taxes where they are. And he goes and asks the elders. He was like, you know what? They're your people. Lower the taxes for them. Who does he end up listening to? Huh? The youth, right? And the people get mad, and his brother kind of like amps up a revolution. And they're like, you know what? We don't need this. We're not gonna be under your rule. And they split. Now they split. How many tribes are there in Israel? How many? 12. Yeah, so Jeroboam took the 10 of the 12 tribes, and Rehoboam was, you know, he got the last two, which are Judea and I think it was Benjamin. Yeah, and so this is when like Israel is just like everything is just like going south for Israel. Did you give me the eraser?
You didn't answer. I said, do you want an eraser? You said, I just want an eraser.
Why didn't you erase it?
Huh? That's good. It's purple. The shirt is purple. I asked him for a marker and an eraser. Like
I said, did you want the eraser? He said, no, just give me the marker. I said, all right.
that's not what I said. That is not at all what I said.
Come on, David.
I got the marker because that's what you asked for.
He needs like in the.
I mean, there's not even an eraser in the upstairs.
Did not.
From where?
I don't care.
Oh, paper towel. Okay.
Paper.
I mean, I wish you guys. I'm gonna start.
Yo, see, draw bigger.
Huh?
Yes, I know. You have to write something.
Okay.
Can you make it a shirt,
Go.
please?
No.
Go.
I'm back.
Don't you have to write a whole bunch of stuff in it?
I'm not right. I'm just going over it.
Dude, we use it.
That's my phone.
Let somebody use permanent marker.
Why do you need
Because he's trying to start doing
I said it was Samaria, but that's not. That's very different.
I know.
Because I can't see it first, huh?
Israel 10 tribes is on the top.
Fix it.
Okay, so this is how things started out. In Israel, we have 10 tribes. The capital of this Israel is Samaria, and the ruler at the moment was Jeroboam. And in Judah, the capital was Jerusalem. They had 2 tribes, and the leader was Rehoboam. Now, what happens here is Judea, this part.
I'm sorry, hold on. I want everybody to pay attention, because if you don't understand this chart right here, you're not going to understand the rest of the Old Testament, you're not going to understand the New Testament. This is key for what happens for the history of Israel. Like this chart right here, what he's explaining to you, is so I need everybody to pay attention to notes.
All right, so this part right here, Judah, they get taken over by whom? Does anybody know?
Babylon?
Babylon. There you go. So this side is taken over by Babylon. Now, right here, the top part it's I don't want to say taken over. Like should it say dispersed?
No, they were taken over by Syria.
Syria, right? Okay. So this the northern part of Israel, well, all of Israel, they get taken over by
Syria.
Syria.
Assyria.
Okay. Oh yeah. That's how you spell it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they get taken over by Assyria, and now so what? Right here in Babylon, does anybody know the king that took over of Judah with Babylon? Huh? Okay, yeah, I don't know how to spell it, so I'm gonna just Neb.
UCH.
It's a very long. So we just gonna call him King Neb, all right? We're gonna shorten it. So he's the king there, and this is the story of like all how Daniel receives interprets this king's dream, and how the gold statue and the three brothers that wouldn't bow down to him, they get sent in the fire and they wouldn't burn. They come out with the Gabriel and stuff. You guys know the story.
Which is today's holiday.
Which is today's holiday, Gabriel. Yes, you guys know this.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. But so Babylon then gets taken over by whom? What? Persia. There you go. Persia. Now keep in mind, like right here is still Assyria. Like now, but this whole part, this what used to be Judea is now owned by whom? Persia, right? So then after Persia, there's the like I'm not gonna get too much in depth with it, but like these people were taken as slaves into Babylon. But then once Persia takes over, they're allowed to go back to Judea, and you guys can read that in the book of Daniel and Isaiah, right?
Nehemiah and
Ezra. Okay, yeah. And so once Persia is taken over Babylon, and who then takes over Persia?
Rome.
Not quite. Before that. Yeah, Alexander the Great.
Greece?
Macedonia.
Alexander the Great takes over Persia, and then who ends up taking over everything?
Rome.
The Roman Empire. Roman Empire is like everything. Like everything, not just the southern part. And then that transitions us into what? The what?
Matthew.
The New Testament, yeah. And that is our review for the Old Testament. And we have a couple of minutes left for those of you that have a question. Yes?
To help us better understand, can you tell us what some of those nations are today? Like Persia?
I don't know what Babylon. Persia is modern day Iran.
Okay.
And
you don't know what Babylon?
yeah, I gotta look up on it. This is the only one I'm certain of.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody in the
Is Babylon
classroom
Iraq?
knows.
Babylon?
Is it Iraq?
What I know is
I think so.
Mesopotamia is
Yeah.
modern day Iran, not Babylon.
No, I thought Persia was the modern day Iran, right?
Iran.
Iran. I didn't say
Yeah,
Iran.
that's right. I think that's right.
Persia is Iran,
Yeah.
right?
I believe. I can't. I know
Yeah.
this references something I read.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Is Judah and Judea the same?
Yeah. But they changed.
No. Wait.
yeah. So the tribe of Judah and Benjamin are one. But one misconception that I want to pre is, you guys see, I thought someone was gonna ask something. Up there it says Israel and then it says Judah. There are no questions that you guys have?
She asked Fasika.
I don't know.
But I don't know, like what I assumed was, this is just, I don't know, from my own common sense, but it's like Jerusalem is part of Israel, so I'm guessing that Israel was two.
That's what he
What is
said.
that?
Like part Judah and then
So
part.
this is the thing, and before this separation, the nation of Israel, when it said the nation of Israel, we were referring to the 12 tribes. After the separation, when it's talking about Israel, it's referring to the northern kingdom, right? And then when it's saying Judea, it's the southern kingdom. So whenever you guys read Israel, after the separation, and I don't want anybody to be talking over me, yeah. After the separation, when we're talking about Israel, we're talking about the 10 kingdoms. And then, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but so what ends up happening, this whole map is helping you understand what happens, right? So in the northern kingdom, all of them are bad kings, all of them. So this is when all the prophets are going to come and try to tell the kings to stop doing what they're doing. This is when Elsa's coming, Elijah's coming. This is when Isaiah and all the other prophets are coming to talk to the bad kings and to persuade them, yo, you guys are acting up. In the southern kingdom, some of them are good, most of them are bad. The kings are mostly bad. There's some good who try to do the opposite of what their fathers did. So when you're reading the Bible, you have to read it in this context. When you're reading Ezra, you got to try to understand this is the time when they're going from Babylon back to Judea to build their temple, which was destroyed when Babylon came in, right? It's the time when you're reading Nehemiah. This is the time when they're building the walls, right? So you have to understand it in that context, because if you just open up Ezra and Nehemiah, you will never understand what's going on unless you understand this background. This is why I'm saying this is very critical, and I always refer to the parable that Christ told of the Good Samaritan, right? The Good Samaritan, are you guys listening? The Good Samaritan is a story where Christ says there's a man on the ground who's beat up and whatnot, and then a Jew comes and doesn't do anything for him, a priest comes and doesn't do anything for him, but a Samaritan comes and helps him out. And everybody's like, wow, that's amazing, right? And you're never going to understand why that's a big deal unless you see this. And where's Samaria at? It's in the northern kingdom. But Christ is preaching to the people in the southern kingdom. The northern and the southern kingdom, they don't like each other. In fact, they thought the northern kingdom were fake Jews. So much to the point that if they were doing trade, they would walk around the northern kingdom, not to make sure that they step on the ground of the northern kingdom. This is how much they disliked them. So the idea of a northern kingdom or a Samaritan guy being good over a Jew or a priest is like baffling to them, right? So you've got to understand the historical context in order to really appreciate the gospel which Christ was preaching to his disciples. So this is why I keep saying this map is critical, and a lot of people don't know this of the history of Israel.
Yeah.
There's a question regarding the birth of Christ. So Mary was, I believe she was engaged before, right? To Joseph, I believe.
Yeah.
So can you briefly go over like what happened to him afterwards? Like, do they?
What do you mean? What happens with him?
Like they were engaged before, right?
Yeah.
And then the Christ was born. Kind of like.
I mean, he still I mean, this is New Testament stuff. Hey, I will go over, but no, he's saying how Mary was engaged to Joseph, but once Christ was born, what happens to him? I mean, he still helps her give her the child. I think that. What?
I don't understand, but in regards to that, we can like bring that. Remember that question? We can talk about it next week. Yeah.
You have a question?
Ask the question.
I didn't have, I was stretching.
So, are you guys feel like you're ready for the Old Testament portion of the test?
Yeah.
Yes?
So you're
No?
not gonna ask me anything on the test that you didn't cover?
Right.
I don't think so. I mean, there's gonna be like some tricky ones, but I'll leave that as a bonus. And this take home. I mean, no, I shouldn't say it like that. It is take home, but don't cheat. That's what I'm gonna say. Yeah.
2 questions. One, correct me if I'm wrong though, but when the Romans came and the Sadducees and the Pharisees, well, the Sadducees left, the Jews, the sect of Jews, and then the Pharisees stayed. And wasn't it didn't Rome create Judea at that point instead of like Judea? Because they installed like their Roman pagan idols into the temple.
That I'm not sure about.
She
Like
brought that
now,
up, and
I know.
That's
Now
my
keep in
question.
mind, like
Let's get it.
after Persia, like Alexander the Great and the Roman Empire taking over these Persian and stuff. It's not in the Bible. How Alexander the Great and how Alexander takes over Persia, it's not in the Bible. This is just history. It's history that like you guys learn in middle school, whatever. Like if you guys look up like what's the history behind Roman Empire and Alexander the Great, this is what you would find. So it's not in the Bible. But as far as what you said, I wouldn't know. Like I don't know about like more of the geographical things that happen.
I mean, and I think I was going to ask. I know like.